The boats didn't come with tourists. They came quietly, cutting across the clear blue water toward a small private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands, a place that looked like paradise from a distance. White sand beaches, palm trees, stone buildings, shining under the Caribbean sun. The island was called Little St. James, and for years it belonged to a man whose wealth and connections reached into the highest levels of American society. His name was Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein purchased Little St. James in 1998 for about $7.95 million, transforming the 70-plus acre island into a private compound. Over time, construction crews built multiple guest houses, a large main residence, a dock, and a strange blue and white structure often described as a temple-like building. Staff members were brought in to maintain the property, and boats regularly delivered supplies from nearby St. Thomas. From the air, nothing looked unusual, but the island's isolation made it almost impossible to see what was happening on the ground. For years, Epstein presented himself as a financier and philanthropist. He socialized with billionaires, politicians, and academics. His homes in New York and Florida were filled with expensive art and antiques. He owned multiple aircraft, including a private jet that flew frequently between New York, Florida, New Mexico, and the Virgin Islands. Flight logs later reviewed in court cases showed dozens of trips over many years. Some flights carried staff and guests. Others included young women whose presence would later become part of criminal investigations. The first major warning signs appeared long before the island became widely known. In 2005, police in Palm Beach, Florida began investigating Epstein after a report from a teenage girl's parents. Detectives soon identified multiple underage victims. According to police records, some girls reported being paid hundreds of dollars per visit, often recruited by other girls who were paid to bring in new victims. The pattern repeated again and again: recruitment, payment, and silence. In 2008, Epstein reached a controversial plea agreement with federal prosecutors. He pleaded guilty to state charges related to soliciting prostitution from a minor and served 13 months in a county jail with work release privileges that allowed him to leave the facility during the day. The agreement was widely criticized for its leniency. It also granted immunity from federal prosecution to Epstein and certain unnamed associates, a decision that would later come under intense scrutiny. For several years after his release, Epstein returned to his homes and continued traveling. The island remained private and largely out of public view, but the accusations never disappeared. Civil lawsuits continued to be filed. Survivors gave interviews. Journalists began to re-examine the case. Documents accumulated in court archives, many of them sealed from public view. Then, in July 2019, Epstein was arrested again, this time by federal agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation and federal prosecutors in New York. He was charged with sex trafficking of minors and conspiracy, with alleged crimes spanning from 2002 to 2005 and involving multiple victims, some as young as 14 years old. Prosecutors alleged that Epstein paid girls hundreds of dollars for sexual encounters and sometimes paid additional money if they recruited other girls. Investigators said the operation involved multiple properties, including homes in Manhattan and Palm Beach, and the private island. During the investigation, authorities searched Epstein's properties, including Little St. James. The island became a central focus of media attention, with helicopters capturing images of its buildings and coastline. Journalists circled offshore in boats, photographing the compound from a distance. What had once been hidden behind privacy and distance was now broadcast worldwide. At that point, the scale of Epstein's wealth was becoming clearer. At the time of his death, his fortune was estimated at over $500 million, though the exact sources of his money remained partly unclear. Court documents and lawsuits suggested that dozens of victims had come forward. Later, compensation programs would receive claims from far more. Then, in August 2019, Epstein was found dead in a jail cell in New York while awaiting trial. His death was officially ruled a suicide by hanging. The case against him ended, but investigations into his associates continued. Attention soon focused on Ghislaine Maxwell, a longtime associate accused of helping recruit and groom underage girls. Prosecutors alleged that Maxwell played a key role in Epstein's operation, helping identify and manipulate victims over a period spanning years. In 2021, Maxwell was convicted on multiple federal charges, including sex trafficking conspiracy and transportation of a minor for illegal sexual activity. In 2022, she was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. By then, the number of known victims had grown significantly. A compensation program established for survivors received more than 36,000 claims, with thousands approved for payment. The program distributed more than $120 million to victims before closing. But the story did not end there. Court documents, often referred to as the Epstein Files, began to be unsealed in stages. These included depositions, contact lists, flight logs, and testimony. The records showed a vast network of acquaintances and associates, though being named in the documents did not necessarily indicate wrongdoing. Still, the scale of Epstein's connections shocked the public. Investigators and journalists attempted to reconstruct timelines from thousands of pages of records. Some documents described patterns of recruitment and exploitation. Others listed phone numbers, addresses, and travel dates. Each release of documents answered some questions and raised new ones. Little St. James remained one of the most mysterious locations connected to Epstein. Employees later described strict instructions about where they could go and what they could discuss. Some said certain buildings were restricted. Others described constant monitoring and high levels of security. The island itself covered about 75 acres, making it large enough for multiple residences and secluded areas hidden by trees and hills. Its distance from the mainland made casual observation almost impossible. In 2016, Epstein purchased a second nearby island, Great St. James, for about $80 million, expanding his private territory in the Caribbean. Together, the islands formed a secluded world reachable only by boat or helicopter. Today, the properties have changed ownership, but their history remains attached to them. Satellite images still show the buildings and docks. Boats still pass through the surrounding waters. The beaches remain quiet. The story of Jeffrey Epstein is not just about one man. It is about systems that allowed abuse to continue for years, despite repeated warnings. It is about victims who were ignored and investigations that stalled. It is about wealth and influence, creating barriers to accountability. Most of all, it is about scale. Federal prosecutors described dozens of victims. Civil cases suggested many more. Thousands eventually came forward in compensation claims. The timeline stretched across decades from the 1990s into the late 2010s. And at the center of it all was a private island in the Caribbean, once hidden from view, now permanently connected to one of the most infamous criminal cases in modern American history. The buildings still stand on Little St. James. The water's still clear, but the name and the files connected to it remain part of a story that is still being studied, debated, and remembered. Loved this story? Then smash that like button right now. It really supports the channel. If you want your friends to hear this incredible tale, share this video with them. And if you're hungry for more stories from this era, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There are plenty more where this came from.